Late autumn, 1944. The night sky over the Pacific Ocean is like a heavy, freezing block of lead pressing. The clock ticks relentlessly, quietly slipping to 3 in the morning. In these perilous depths, an American submarine runs. The United States ship Archerfish is violently cutting through the waves. On the bridge stands Commander Joseph Enright. Facing the biting sea wind, his brows are locked in deep concentration, his eyes seemingly trying to pierce the blackness. No one could have ever predicted that this very commander, a man who had once been stripped of his calm and for hesitation, he was about to etch his name and his submarine into the absolute pinnacle of global naval history forever and evermore. The prey he is locking on to right now is no conventional warship. It is a super leviathan made of steel, sprinting madly across the surface. This is a sea-going fortress, measuring an astonishing 266 meters. It boasts a displacement of 64,000 tons. It is the Japanese Imperial Navy deeply hidden ultimate weapon. The mysterious mutation of the monstrous Yamato-class battleships, the super aircraft carrier Shinano, a giant behemoth. This behemoth, hailed by Japan as the unsinkable god, had been officially in service for a mere 9 days. It was rushed. It was rushed into these very waters destined to become its grave, so hastily that its internal watertight doors, the very mechanisms of life and death, were not completely installed. For the past few hours, a suffocating chase began. A suffocating chase between the submarine and this gargantuan ship has been playing out in the pitch black of the ocean. According to every established rule of naval combat at the time, the idea of a surfaced submarine chasing down an enemy, chasing down and assassinating a massive carrier from behind, especially one sprinting at 20 knots, was total lunacy. Especially one shielded by a tight screen of 5 destroyers, was absolute lunacy. Yet, at the fateful intersection of 3 in the morning, this arrogant, towering giant executes an incomprehensible maneuver. Ironically attempting to evade submarine attacks, it actively changes course, perfectly presenting its massive broadside right into the crotcheris of the Archerfish torpedo tubes. This is not just a collision. This is not just a hardcore collision of steel and high explosives. It is the ultimate judgment of hubris and destiny. Today, let us dive deep into the abyss and relive this unimaginable hunt. Let us turn back the hands of time to the start. Let us turn back the hands of time to the beginning of this grueling pursuit. Since leaving port on November the 2nd, the United States ship Archerfish had been executing a solitary mission, patrolling the vast, empty expanse of the ocean. Maritime patrols are almost always defined by agonizingly long, mind-numbing stretches of boredom through countless days. Through countless days and nights, the radar ping they received this evening was their single valuable contact in this sea. The blip bouncing on the radar screen revealed an exceptionally massive silhouette. Commander Enright and his nerve-racked crew have been relentlessly tailing this mysterious target across the pitch ocean. Relentlessly tailing this target across the pitch-black ocean for over 6 agonizing hours. The submarine diesel engines. The diesel engines are roaring with fury as they push forward on the surface at absolute maximum power, desperately trying to close the deadly gap between them and their prey. However, the adversary is not only gigantic, but terrifyingly fast, consistently maintaining a high-speed sprint of 20 knots. Making matters even more hopeless is the tight perimeter around this steel mountain, like a pack of loyal wolves on guard. Exactly 5 destroyers are shadowing the giant, providing an impenetrable wall of firepower and anti-submarine screening. This was a contest of extreme desperation. Every time the Archerfish surfaced, attempting to use the dark cloak of night. Attempting to use the cloak of night to bite back into the chase, the distance between them simply did not shrink at all. Instead, it was ruthlessly and steadily pulled further apart. Faced with this untouchable leviathan, the deck officer. The deck officer meticulously recorded their tactical assessments in the ship log. This was highly likely an oil tanker. An unusually large oil tanker, or perhaps a massive merchant vessel converted into a military auxiliary ship for the war. The logic driving this conclusion was cold and straightforward. In the brutal theater of this war, what kind of asset truly warranted the extravagant protection of a 5-destroyer escort? Through their severely limited visibility, the target projected a suffocating aura of dominance. Its overall profile was incredibly elongated. The freeboard appeared. The freeboard appeared strangely low, yet the width it occupied on the water was absurdly vast. In the autumn of 1944, the American submarine force had already forged a strictly pragmatic tactical doctrine. A pragmatic and lethal tactical doctrine baptized in blood and fire. Every submarine commander had developed an instinctual sixth sense through countless life or death encounters, knowing exactly what kind of targets in the treacherous Pacific were actually viable. Within this cold set of tactical laws, a high-speed fleet carrier moving under the heavy guard of destroyers was definitively not on the menu for primary submarine targets. Behind this rule lay an insurmountable physical chasm in naval war. The physical speed limits of a submarine, whether surfaced or submerged, dictated that trailing and attacking a high-speed fleet from the rear was virtually an impossible mission. The statistics of the entire war speak for themselves. Throughout the entirety of World War II, the U.S. Navy submarine fleet only managed to sink a total of 3 Japanese aircraft carriers. The United States ship Cable La fired 6 torpedoes at war. Fired 6 torpedoes at the mainline carrier H. Okaku, landing 3 confirmed hits to send her to the bottom. On that exact same day, the United States ship Albacore used a single, unimaginably fatal torpedo to end the life of the cutting-edge armored carrier Tahoe. However, these shocking victories weren't ever achieved in the sea. Were never achieved through the exhausting, relentless tale chased Arctic from behind. For Enright, what he was attempting right now was the shattering of an ironclad tactical law. To understand this impossible pursuit today, you have to look deep into the man standing in the conning tower of the Archerfish. Joseph Francis Enright, graduating from the prestigious U.S. Naval Academy in 1933, his long early career was technically solid but felt remarkably unremarkable. He lacked the dazzling, reckless aura of men. He lacked the dazzling, reckless aura of a textbook war hero. Instead, he functioned like a well-oiled machine, methodically passing through layers of submarine qualifications and steadily completing the standard preparations for command. To the peers who fought alongside him in those freezing tin cans. Enright's most defining trait was absolutely not a fanatical or nothing bravado in the face of enemy fire and explosions. Conversely, his greatest weapon was an unshakable, rock-solid tenacity when tracking a target, when faced with a long, agonizing, and potentially fruitless chase. He possessed a patience that bordered on the supernatural. Yet, behind this resume of perseverance hid a deep, dark scar. In 1943, Enright was given the heavy responsibility of commanding the submarine United States ship Dace. During what should have been a glorious combat patrol, he successfully located and locked onto a Japanese warship in the sea. He spent precious hours hyper-focused on developing and calculating torpedo firing solutions, trying to engineer a good plan, trying to engineer a flawless attack. But at the final, life or death moment, he flinched. He issued the order to stand. He issued the order to stand down and not fire. This missed opportunity did not just let a large enemy escape into the night. It came down like a sledgehammer, utterly shattering Enright confidence and foundation as a submarine commander of the ship. Crushed by immense psychological pressure and self-doubt, he made a decision that shocked everyone. He voluntarily confessed. He voluntarily confessed to his superiors that he had lost his nerve and requested to be relieved of his command duties. Naval Highcom and granted his request, pulling him from the smoke-filled front lines and placing him in a quiet staff position. Placing him in a quiet staff position back at Pearl Harbor. For a naval officer thirsting for honor, this was an exile. This was an exile to the abyss. Fortunately, in August 1944, the gears of fate shifted once more in the Navy. The Navy decided to give him a second chance, handing him the reins of the Archerfish, carrying the weight of past humiliation. And a burning desire for redemption, Enright now faced the most critical test of his life in the dark waters of the Pacific. Minute by agonizing minute, the tug of war in the darkness stretched everyone's nerves to the absolute breaking point. Finally, at exactly 3 in the morning, a highly dramatic and profoundly lethal turning point occurred on the water. The colossal beast they had been chasing for 6 hours was not actually running in a straight line on the ocean's surface. It was strictly executing a pre-planned, zigzag anti-submarine maneuver. The core purpose of this doctrine was to make the ship trajectory erratic and unpredictable, constantly resetting any submarine firing calculations so that a high-value, fast-moving warship would never expose its soft underbelly to a periscope. In theory, it was a flawless defensive strategy. But the absurdity of war often lies in its sheer unpredictability. At this specific juncture, the giant ship executed a turn, and its new heading pointed directly, flawlessly, toward the exact position the Archerfish had been stubbornly holding. This sudden pivot instantaneously and violently altered the geometry of the battlefield. The massive ship did not just drastically close the distance today. It hand-delivered its largest, most vulnerable broadside straight into a fatal 1,400-yard kill zone right in front of Enright. Enright's brain reacted in a fraction of a second. He immediately sounded the combat alarm. Battle station's torpedo. Like a phantom great white-smelling blood in the water, the Archerfish rapidly plunged deep. Plunged to periscope depth, preparing to deliver the killing blow. But the crisis above was far from over. Those five destroyers were still frantically prowling the surface, their active sonar sending rhythmic, terrifying pings through the water, each echo sounding like the Grim Reaper knocking on the hull. The situation facing the Archerfish was infinitely complex. Enright firing solution was far from perfect. The target's shocking speed and sudden course change meant their calculations were still heavily reliant on gut instinct and experience. But he knew in his bones that this was his one, his only, and his final chance. At 3:17 in the morning, the dead silence of the deep sea was violently shattered. Enright issued the command that would alter history. 6 massive Mark 14 steam-powered torpedoes, roaring with the fury of destruction, erupted from the Archerfish forward tubes in a wide, fan-shaped spread, hurtling straight toward the dark leviathan in the distance, after what felt like an eternity of suffocating anticipation. The ocean resonated with 4 soul-shaking, catastrophic explosions. Out of the 6 torpedoes, 4 had violently bitten into the flesh of the giant ship and successfully detonated in the sea. Knowing the immediate danger of exposing their position, Enright instantly ordered the Archerfish into a deep dive, commanding total radio and mechanical silence throughout the boat. The heavily wounded Japanese fleet erupted into chaos. Furious destroyers began blindly and violently hurling depth charges into the abyss. Massive shockwaves ripped through it, the concussive water pressure causing tangible physical damage to the Archerfish hull. But Enright displayed the terrifying patience that defined him, leading his crew to hold their ground in the claustrophobic depths. Ultimately, the enraged but disoriented destroyer Screen mistakenly shifted their search net to the northwest, allowing the Archerfish to miraculously slip away from the jaws of death, as the thunder echoes of the torpedo blasts. Torpedo blasts swept through the Shinano hull. The true identity of this supership was infinitely more staggering today than any target Enright could have ever dreamed of. This was the absolute final pride of the Japanese Imperial Navy. Shinano. This monstrosity boasted a jaw-dropping total length of 266 meters, her standard design. Her standard displacement was 64,000 tons, making her a literal moving mountain on the dark ocean water. Her birth was a saga of ambition and chaos. Way back in 1940, her keel was laid at the famous Yosakusa Arsenal. Originally burdened with the expectation of becoming the third ship of the invincible Yamato-class battleships. However, the merciless gears of war ground down the dream of big guns. By 1942, as the paradigm shifted, as the paradigm of naval warfare aggressively evolved, this massive construction project was abruptly halted and redesigned. She was radically mutated into a heavily armored fleet aircraft carrier, inheriting the bloodline of the Yamato ship design. The carrier was armed to the teeth defensively. The armor plated across her flight deck was one of the heaviest layers. One of the heaviest, most impenetrable defensive layers ever installed on a surface warship in the history of human naval war. Inside her gargantuan hull, she was meticulously subdivided into hundreds upon hundreds of independent watertight ship zones. In the fanatical blueprints of the Naval High Command, this was a divine, unsinkable fortress capable of withstanding hits, capable of withstanding catastrophic punishment and still sailing with pride. But the carrier had only just held her ceremony. Celebrated her commissioning ceremony on November 19, 1944. From that moment to the night the sub hunted, the submarine spotted her in the vast ocean. A mere 9 days had passed. This titanic vessel, carrying the final hopes of an empire, was rushed to the brutal front lines before she even had the chance to complete trials. To complete a single, proper sea trial in calm waters, when the 4 torpedoes violently tore through the heavy steel armor. Tore through what was supposed to be impenetrable armor, this super ship was carrying not only about 2,000 men, 2,400 naval personnel, but terrifyingly, an estimated 1,435 working men. Civilian shipyard workers who were still on board trying to finish construction. This was a catastrophic vulnerability. This was a catastrophic, fatal vulnerability. This giant, worshipped as a maritime god, was actually a fragile infant ship. A fragile, premature infant. Crucial watertight door components had never undergone any real-world testing in the sea waters. These very hatches, designed to save the ship life in a critical moment, practically could not form a tight seal at all. Facing sudden, apocalyptic disaster, the Shinano Supreme Commander pushed past his initial shock and made a fatal decision. Made a decision that would doom everyone. In his absolute conviction, this 60,000-ton apex of naval technology, the apex of imperial shipbuilding technology, could not possibly be brought down by a mere 4 torpedoes. After all the hits. After all, the carrier was designed on paper to absorb exactly this level of catastrophic damage and keep sailing safely. Blinded by this fatal arrogance, the Admiral outright refused to reduce speed. He stubbornly ordered the ship to run fast. Stubbornly ordered the ship to maintain its original heading. Incomprehensibly demanded that the giant continue fast pace. demanded that the giant continue sprinting at a blistering 18 knots. He placed his blind faith in the control teams. Placed his blind faith in the damage control teams, expecting them to isolate the ruptured, rapidly flooding sections today. This was an unimaginably absurd and destructive error. The Admiral failed to realize that because the watertight doors leak. Because the watertight doors could not properly seal, the ship's internal defenses were already a sieve, pushed heavily by sea. Pushed by the tremendous hydrostatic pressure generated by moving at 18 knots, the freezing, violent seawater rushed. The freezing, violent seawater was brutally and forcibly rammed deep into the fragile internal structure of the ship hull. This unsinkable ship was quite literally using its own speed to tear itself apart from the inside out. The catastrophic sea. The catastrophic flooding triggered an irreversible list. By 5 in the morning, this once invincible steel Leviathan ship. Leviathan was leaning hopelessly to starboard at a 13-degree angle. Over the next 2 hours, the situation declined. The situation rapidly spiraled into complete devastation. By 7 in the morning, the list had reached a horrifying angle. The list had reached a horrifying 20 degrees. Chaos and pure despair completely consumed the flight deck on the ship. Completely consumed the flight deck. Faced with a totally uncontrollable reality, the Vice Admiral finally, agonizingly spoke. Agonizingly gave the ultimate order to abandon ship at 10:18 in the morning. The clock stopped at exactly 10:50. The clock stopped at exactly 10:57 in the morning, just 7 hours and 40 minutes after torpedoes found ships. Just hours after those 4 torpedoes found their mark, this beast of the sea, swallowed by a massive, violent sea vortex, plunged forever to the dark, crushing bottom of the Pacific. Over 1,435 sailors dead below. Sailors and civilian workers became the luxurious burial goods of this supercarrier, entombed eternally in the freezing. Entombed eternally in the freezing depths of the sea. When Commander Enright returned to his base carrying the news. Carrying news of this earth-shattering kill, he was met not with thunderous applause from the Naval Command at all. He was met not with applause, but with deep, paralyzing skepticism from his superiors, United States Naval Command. United States Naval Intelligence initially refused to believe a single word of his combat report from the patrol run. Refused to believe a word of his report, according to their vast and highly complex military intelligence networks. According to their vast intelligence networks, Japan possessed absolutely no industrial capability to build a vessel. Japan possessed no capability to build a supership of that incredible magnitude. They subjectively concluded today. They subjectively concluded that Enright had merely sunkest and a large carrier or a converted merchant cruiser ship. A converted merchant cruiser, maxing out at perhaps 28,000 tons of displacement. The Japanese military. The Japanese, desperately trying to maintain their crumbling national morale in the face of inevitable military defeat. Desperately trying to maintain morale, classified the very existence of the Shinano as an absolute top-secret file. Classified the very existence, let alone her sinking, as an absolute top-secret, hiding it flawlessly from the public. Hiding it flawlessly from the public for the remainder of the war. It was not until the dust settled after the war. Until the dust settled after the war, and mountains of classified documents were finally unsealed by the commanders. Documents were finally unsealed that the American intelligence community confirmed the miraculous impossibility now. The intelligence community confirmed the miraculous impossibility the Archerfish achieved that fateful night at sea. The Shinano, a warship that lived for exactly 9 days, officially became the largest warship ever sunk in combat. Officially became the largest, highest displacement warship ever sunk by a single submarine in the history of humans. Sunk by a single submarine in the history of human warfare. This unprecedented, monumental record still hangs today. This monumental record still hangs untouchable in the highest heavens of naval history, today and forever into the time. The ocean depths guard the final resting places of these steel titans. If you want more hardcore breakdowns of history. If you want more hardcore breakdowns of history, deadliest miscalculations, and strategic naval warfare decisions right now,